Hello, today I want to show yet another interpretation of the helmet. For this iteration I have taken an entirely novel approach to the design of the upper. In looking at the illustration, a number of people suggested to me that the upper could be constructed of rope. I initially dismissed this idea for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that the diagonal lines on the upper alternate from course to course, leaning first right, then left, then right again. This is not how you would construct a helmet from rope. Medieval European rope helmets are constructed from a single coil of rope. In a helmet constructed from a single coil, all of the diagonal lines face the same direction. This means that if we were to interpret the illustration as being made from rope, it would have to be made from 6 independent hoops. These hoops would have had to have been made from at least 2 separate pieces of rope. One which had been wound clockwise and one which had been wound counterclockwise. The other issue with the rope interpretation is perhaps more of a nitpick. It has to do with the angle of the diagonal lines. On any given piece of rope, the angle is never more than 45 degrees and often less. In the illustration, we see that the angle is about 60 or 70, 80 degrees. In short, I did not and do not think this was a rope helmet. Another suggestion that was made was that it could be something like a turban. Again, I initially dismissed this because a leather turban would weigh something like 3 or 4 pounds and would take like 10 square feet of leather. Considering the base of the helmet is only like 2 pounds, that would make for a very top-heavy and awkward helmet. Nevertheless, the idea was interesting enough to be worth exploring. I spent some time looking at illustrations of people in turbans. Some of them from roughly the same time period and in roughly the same medium as this illustration, and none of them looked really close. The idea prompted me to do some experimentation with wrapping materials. This led me to the realization that while the diagonal lines are at the wrong angle for a piece of rope, they are at roughly the right angle for something wrapped in leather. I then attempted to apply this realization to helmet design. The upper on this helmet is constructed of a series of hoops. These hoops are made of loose bundles of corn husk that have been wrapped in leather. These hoops nestle one inside the other on top of the Gastoa frame, inside of the ring of slat armor. They're held in place by friction. The plume, which I don't think is correct, I made from a series of corn husk braids, which I wrapped around the frame and put through the hole. There are too many of these braids stuffed through for the smallest hoop to come off without the application of muscle. The void within the helmet I filled with loose corn husks. People were complaining that I didn't put the last iteration on, so even though I don't like appearing in front of camera, here we go. My present line of thinking is that with the lower crown of slat armor, the head would be fairly effectively protected from arrows and sideways blows. The only vulnerability then would be from downward blows from heavy weapons like a club or an axe. This style of construction would be very effective against something like that. It's basically a half a foot of cushions on top of the head. I quite like this interpretation. Out of all the ones I've done, it's the most functional and it matches the illustration better than the others. I'm still not quite sure about how the hoops should be attached to the helmet though. This plume looks completely wrong, and I'm not sure if a more visually appropriate material like cattails could hold the helmet together in the same way. There's also the question of the materials for the hoops themselves. They could be constructed of any number of things. The core of the hoops could be literally any relatively light material. Corn husk, cedar bark, reeds, grass, anything. The wrapping could be leather, rawhide, birch bark, or possibly split ash. Whatever the case, for the time being, I think I've gone as far as this illustration can take me. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this interesting.